We are coming to you live this morning from the Discovery Center in Lewiston, Idaho, along the banks of the Snake River. And there in the photograph, you can see the Snake River in the background, and those are the heights of Clarkston. And there in the foreground, Teneslaloo, or Little Wolf, the ceremonial canoe being returned by our party to the Chinookan people. And we're looking forward to taking Little Wolf down the rest of this watershed of the Snake River and the Columbia River to the mouth of the Columbia, to the Chinook people who have long been friends of ours. And we're going to be talking to you a little bit more about canoes today. So we start the day by looking at the canoe that's going to be featured when we get to the ocean. My name is Scott Mandrell on behalf of Tim Gore and Jim Sturm. Thanks for joining us for Lewis and Clark Then and Now, linking the trail to America's students. And good morning and welcome to Live with Lewis for the 13th of October, 2005. It's been 3 weeks since we had an opportunity to speak with you last, and a lot has happened. We have spent the last couple of weeks at our canoe camp, Canoe Camp 2005. 200 years ago, of course, Lewis and Clark made their way down from the Weippe Meadow, where we broadcast to you last, near Weippe, Idaho. Made their way on horseback yet, and foot, down across those meadows, down into the area of the Nez Perce, or the Nimipu people. And by the way, Tatsmewi, the way I greeted you this morning, is Nimipu for good morning. And into the land of the Nimipu, into the land of Lapway, or the Slap, or the butterfly. You may remember some time ago when we first came into Idaho down at Lemhi, we talked about, as we walked over the pass down into the green valleys, that one of the remarkable experiences we had was we were immediately met by just hordes of butterflies. And indeed, Lapway, this is the area we're in here. Lapway means butterfly, and this is the land of the butterfly that we are in here. And indeed, it is beautiful, beautiful country. We're going to show you some pictures of it today. 200 years ago, Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, and the Corps of Discovery were actually, they were a little west of here, and we're going to get there today. We've moved over these 3 weeks quite a bit, starting with just a few days ago when the water portion began again for us. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But 200 years ago, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the Corps of Discovery, had passed these couple of weeks here with the Nez Perce people, making their canoes in preparation for the descent of the Snake and Columbia River, and ultimately to the ocean, which was the destination, of course. And at that time, with still high hopes of making there in time to catch a tall ship so that they could come back around to the east coast of the United States via water, via tall ship and the normal trading routes. At any rate, since we saw you, historically, the Corps made their way down. They met the Nimipu people, which is what Nimipu means. They spent time with them. They were pitiful and sick and exhausted, and the Nez Perce took them in, cared for them, helped nurse them back to health, fed them, and indeed, ultimately, really were instrumental in the making of the canoes that would carry them on the rest of their journey. Likewise, when we entered this area, we were met by a tremendous number of local folks who have extended their hospitality, and we want to thank all of those people, the people of Weippe, the people of Orofino, the people of Fraser, Peck, Lapway, certainly, Kamei, all of the communities along the Clearwater River, all the way down here to Lewiston and Clarkston, where we have been working these last couple of weeks, here near the Discovery Center. Now, the Discovery Center, where we're located today, again, on the banks of the Snake River, is a facility of the Idaho State Parks. It is a beautiful facility that not only offers interpretation and addresses the issues of Lewis and Clark, but really, on a wider scale, talks about this area. Certainly, Lewis and Clark were an important part of the story, but as you can see in the background, maybe if we show a shot later, when you saw that opening shot, there's a mountain lion, a statue of a mountain lion. In the background, you'll see there is the framework for a teepee, the framework for a wigwam, and there's a tremendous amount of interactive learning opportunities here at this facility. In fact, this may ultimately be the home for the canoe that we built here at Canoe Camp. So without further ado, let's take a look at what we've been doing as part of the Lewis and Clark Then and Now project for the last 3 weeks. And if we can start looking at some of the slides that we have from the time we left Weippe, we'll talk you through those and hopefully give you some sense of what the last 3 weeks has been for us, as well as what it would have been for the original expedition. Now, what you're looking at here are some pestles. These are artifacts, Indian artifacts, that have been found up near the Weippe area in areas where there were villages. And these were areas where these weren't necessarily personal possessions, but more like a cache of tool items for what appeared to have been a summer village. This is where the Nez Perce would have gathered camas. and the beautiful camas prairies that are up there. And so this was a summer camp area, and there's a number of artifacts that have been found in that area. We can continue to move through this, and you can see these are shaped tools. When you hold them in your hand, you know for a fact that this was something used as a tool. And as you saw in the end picture there before, and we'll see again in a moment, there was some roughness. You can see where the grinding has been done in a stone mortar and pestle. This is the mortar, of course, being the bowl or the crucible, as it were, where items would be crushed. And as we move from Weippe, we move into Fraser, and of course, Private Fraser, Jay Rotkin, moving along with us, was happy to see that town. He felt at home, and here we are again on this beautiful expanse of prairie, something that people may not understand exists between the high elevation of the Bitterroot Mountains and the lower valleys as we move down, much like we find in a lot of the river valleys across America. And here's this lush, fertile prairie as we make our way down toward Orofino. Jerry Moore and his wife Sandy host to us throughout the way there, and as we make our way yet on horseback. This is still a couple of weeks ago, and we're making our way to Orofino, and all sorts of curious visitors and witnesses to our pain as we make our way by. And here's something. There's a lot of real estate for sale here in Clearwater Valley. There's a real fixer-upper here. And this is the kind of thing that you see as you start to come back into civilization. The horses, again, that we saw in the Bitterroot, Lemhi, and Salmon valleys are very, very plentiful here. The Appaloosas now in this area. And you see here as we descend into the Clearwater Valley, spectacular view. And there's a hawk in mid-flight there that was just below us as we came down out of the high prairie of Weippe. And you'll see horses again. Horses played an important part to the original expedition. And again, these are Appaloosas mostly out here. There's a place we chose not to stay there and stayed in our tents as well. A lot of properties here were old homesteads. This was sort of the outskirts of the community and still is today. Horses, again, plentiful in this area as they were 200 years ago. Remember, Lewis and Clark left their horses with the Nez Perce until they returned the following year. And here we are moving through a field of not wild horses, but a pasture of horses. The locals told us that we could go ahead and continue on the trail, and what took us through this area here was the trail itself. The reason we are passing this pasture right here is this is the trail that Lewis and Clark brought down, the old Nimi Poo Trail, right down into the Clearwater Valley. And there you can see, looking up the Clearwater, and in just a moment, we'll take a look down the Clearwater. And there's Churchill Clark, as his great-great-great-great-grandfather would have done, surveying the area. And here we are on top of Jim's Point. This is the high elevation before you drop into the valley. This is Jim's Point, named for Jim Ford, the founder of one of the early founders of the Orofino area there. And we are on top of this high elevation there, looking down, and there in the distance, the town of Orofino, and ultimately the watershed to the Columbia, leading down to the Snake and down to the Columbia River. So this is a very exciting time for us, as it would have been for the original expedition, knowing that finally they were going to be able to get back into boats. And here you see the treacherous descent as we made our way down. And there, this is interesting, a cedar stump. Some of the elders of the Nez Perce tribe believe that the cedar trees were more likely the canoes that Lewis and Clark made their canoes out of, were cedars. People have oftentimes said, well, we don't have cedars big enough to do that. And yet, we've been fortunate enough to be shown by some of the elders of the Nez Perce these old areas where there are cedars, old-growth cedars have been cut down many, many years ago that were entirely large enough even to make the captain's canoes, which were 4 feet wide and 50 feet long. And here you see us descending by horseback down into the Clearwater Valley above Orofino. Beautiful, beautiful countryside as we break out into the Clearwater Valley. And there is the Clearwater, a spectacular, beautiful river. And Bison, happy to get to town where he was able to get a raw chicken and enjoy himself at the 4-H club, where we finally ended our horse trip at the Orofino 4-H club. And there's Betty, Buck, and Lady that carried us over the mountains across the Lolo Trail. And of course, I was heartbroken to say goodbye to my very, very trusty mount. And of course, John Hill, who provided us with those horses, as did Ward Whitty out of Salmon, Idaho, John Hill there out of the Alder, Montana area. And right at Orofino, of course, the Nez Perce National Historic Park Canoe Camp, the site that Lewis and Clark built their canoes across from the Dvorak Dam, which controls the North Fork, which spills into the Clearwater there. Here we are at Canoe Camp, the original Canoe Camp, now a park site. This is not where any of the reenactment reconstruction took place, simply a marker of the area that they believe, according to the journals. In fact, these watersheds here have not changed. There's the confluence of these two rivers, and this is where Lewis and Clark built their canoes. So the view you have there, other than the modern engineering, is what they saw. And as we passed into this area, remember we're on tribal lands now, and here's an old railroad trestle that runs across some tribal land. to give you some idea about how the 19th century played out for this area, the railroad, of course, played an important part. And as the railroad came through this area, they would literally blast out these hillsides and create these tunnels because it was easier to do that than try to engineer around them, these steep and deep ravines that were in here. And there you'll see as we look through the tunnel. Now, when they built this trestle through here, they actually had to span a little bit of the river. And when they did, they cut off a pond, and there's an interior pond now. And that's part of the tribal fishing fisheries now. Is the tribe is very, very involved. And when I talk about the tribe, the Nez Perce tribe, very involved in environmental matters, land management, fisheries management, the restoration of the Chinook, the salmon rather. And here you see a wickiup. Wickiups are still located all along the rivers. These are places, little shelters, traditional shelters, just a place made out of willows to get under. And if you read the journals, you'll find many mentions of the wickiups from the time they meet the Shoshone throughout their time spent with the Nez Perce and down the Columbia River. And here, tunnel pound trout fisheries, and you'll see that in addition to the salmon, of course, the trout and other things. Now, here we are at this location. This canoe is this is the canoe we built, being worked on right here next door, adjacent to the building we're broadcasting from today at the Discovery Center in Lewiston, Idaho. And this is what we started with. We started with a 7,000-pound, 33-foot long, essentially 33 inches in diameter, and the log itself was about 34 feet long. It's now 26 feet long, as you see here, and we're starting to shape the canoe. We wanted to understand something as we made this canoe, that like one of our Lewis and Clark mentors and Bicentennial mentors has always talked about, Glenn Bishop, who built the keel boats in St. Charles, that these watercraft, these replica watercraft, would have to not only fulfill the function and answer to the narratives and descriptions given by the journals of Lewis and Clark, but they must also be able to function in today's waterways. When you saw the Clearwater there, you were looking at a river that was very much as it was 200 years ago. The rivers that this boat will be asked to ply are very fundamentally different. The Columbia River, the Snake River are all dammed up, as the Missouri River was. This is deep water causing lake effects from the wind. So we're going to talk about 3- and 4-foot waves on a regular basis. Okay, this is not going to be an unusual thing. Over the next few weeks, you'll see us engaging in that. And as we move these canoes through this very dangerous water, it's very different than Lewis and Clark saw. So what you see here in this slide is engineering taking place. This log is being subdivided. Its center lines for weight and symmetrical distribution of weight are being determined. And here we are beginning to plane down the bottom of this so that we have a flat bottom. A canoe is a flat-bottomed vessel by definition. And so we are making the bottom of the canoe flat, and we're working just under what's known as Swallow's Nest Rock. And this is a beautiful landmark along the Snake River. And here our guest, our mascot, I guess as it were, a snake came by. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the snakes in this area. It's a bull snake. It's not a dangerous snake. In fact, a very helpful snake. And a snake was killed when we rolled that 7,000-pound log over starting to work on it. And curiously, throughout the time we worked on it, snakes were around us. And indeed, we incorporated one into the design of the boat. And you'll see that in just a moment. Here is Mike Clark. He and his partner John Rusky, who do their own educational outreach via the internet and through canoe trips, have joined us, and we're beginning the ads work. And actually, the ads work is well underway. You can see in the back about 6,000 pounds of weight in the back that's been dug out by axe and adze. John Rusky there, a master boat builder from down in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and I'm taking a whack at it myself. We did a lot of work to hone this down. We have about 2-inch walls on this dugout canoe. It weighs approximately 750 pounds, which is quite extraordinary. And here we are at our canoe camp, a marriage of old and new. Of course, the project then and now, and this canoe camp has answered that fully. There you see a beautiful morning over Clarkston and over the Clarkston-Lewiston Valley as we continue to work throughout this 10-day period in which we built the boat. A lot of visitors came to see us working on the boat, and it's been a tremendous community project. A lot of folks from the community getting involved. Now, there's a slide that's out of order. That's back to the Weippe Prairie, just as a reminder. Here we are visited by a number of young people from the Spokane area who joined us and had a chance to get in the canoe and work on it a little bit. And there's one of our heron neighbors. There's a lot of herons that live in this area, and it's good to be back on a big river like this so that we begin to see the wildlife and waterfowl that we've been used to on the Missouri. Now, there's a sketch of a bear. John Rusky, not only a great boat builder but artisan as well, incorporated the image of a bear on the front of our canoe. And you'll see he's got a snake on the back of it. And there's a heart on this boat as well. Now, the bear on the front is taking us, as the grizzly does, as the bear is taking us to the salmon. We're going to the people, the salmon people, the Chinook at the mouth of the Columbia. On the rear of the canoe, we'll see in a little while, a snake, because we're leaving the land of the Snake River, the snake people. And here you see the adze marks as we continue to dig deeper and deeper into this once living and now reborn tree, this Ponderosa pine tree. And of course, our friends and compatriots in this exercise, the bull snakes that are all around us, crossing over an electrical cord, sort of a then and now moment in of itself. Our canoe camp was very, very productive. Many hundreds of people joined us down here. The community has been very, very helpful. All of the merchants in Lewiston. I want to thank Bennett Lumber for the tree. And here's Jim Jameson and his son, Andrew. Of course, Jay Rotkin, a welder by trade, being pressed into service as a carpenter here. And the work's really coming along nicely. And there you see the prow of the boat developing and even a slight keel being edged in there by John Ruskey, to give the boat the sort of aerodynamic design necessary to move through these waters and indeed to be a canoe. And there you see the little artistic coloring taking place on the face of the bear as the image itself is incorporated. Of course, this being a Lewis and Clark then and now project, in addition to using the traditional methods, we incorporated a lot of modern concepts into the design of this canoe, because this canoe will, of course, as we mentioned, be used on modern, not traditional rivers. And here you see the canoe on its side, shaping up, and it's taking form rather nicely. And in the midst of all this canoe building, we spent a great deal of time with our Nimiipuu friends. The Nez Perce are an important tribe in American history, and in of their own history. Of course, they fought their last war against the United States in 1877. It was settled peacefully, or at least through treaty, with Chief Joseph, and I would hope that educators and teachers, students would take the time to learn more about Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce people. We were in the town of Lapwai in these pictures, where we sweated several evenings with members of the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee, actually council members, and other members of the community there, talking about issues of historical and contemporary importance. There's Tom Iyer, our Sergeant Ordway out here, who made this canoe camp possible, the Grand Exalted Knight of the Elks, and I think future exalted leader there of the local Elks Club. The Elks Club has been instrumental in supporting us in this out here. And there you see the canoe taking shape. Again, we mentioned Bennett Lumber, the folks at the paint stores, Columbia Paints, who helped us out with some things. And here we are, the canoe finally being finished, and of course, heating the branding iron, and it becoming finally a property of the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Expedition here. And there you see the captain's brand on there. And there's the snake that gave its life when we rolled that tree over, is now reborn in the tree which gave its life to make this journey. And these things don't offer any necessarily fundamentally better water handling, but they certainly make us feel better about our journey as we have a spiritual one as well. And here's one of the young men from Orofino, the night before we launched the boat, whose father came down to give us a hand and help the last night as we prepared. And you saw those little holes on the side of the gunnels there to run some straps through to hold our gear in. And we've been joined by many other folks this week. Moose Jones, who was with us in the White Cliffs from out in the Portsmouth, Ohio area, who's joined us here. And there you see Moose as John Coulter surveying the deep, deep Clearwater Valley, which just downstream he'll have the opportunity to cross Coulter's Creek, now called Potlatch Creek. And we can continue to run through those, Jim. And there you see, high above, there he is, Jay Moose Jones surveying the river that he's about to run. Of course, Bison is ready to go. Bison, let's get in the canoe and let's go. Let's hit the water. It's been a long time. So Jim's got some footage. Jim Sturm has been here with us this past week, and he shot some footage of the first day out on the water. So we're going to take a look at some of the video and go to that to give you a little bit of an idea about what's happened. And this, of course, would have been this was earlier in the week when we actually got underway on the 11th. Was it the 11th, Jim? 12th? We're losing track of time here. We began our voyage, I guess, as it were, on the 11th, as we made our way down the river and down the Clearwater. And here you'll see us getting underway. Actually, no, I guess it was when this first footage, I apologize, that's when we made our way down the Snake. We first had to go over to Orofino, and here you see the canoe being loaded here at Hell's Gate Canyon Park, our Canoe Camp 2005 being loaded onto a flatbed, trailer, and we'll be taking it up the river to Orofino to the ramp there at Osaka Ramp, right across from, on the north side. They launched from the south side, but we're directly across from the original camp where we'll be launching. Here the boat's being loaded onto the trailer to take to Orofino, and this actually would be the 7th when we were doing this up here last week. And here is Brooklyn Baptiste, a council member for the Nez Perce tribe, and we want to say Kachiyaoyao, which means thank you, Kachiyaoyao, to all the Nimipu, to the Nez Perce people, especially to Brooklyn, who has been such a great friend during our time here in Brooklyn, who has recently returned from Sundance ceremonies in the South Dakota, and who practices the medicine wheel way of life, is just a man like you and I. He'll remind us he has no special powers, but he is a man on a spiritual voyage of his own, and he's taken the time here in this photograph. You see him joining us to give a traditional prayer and ask a blessing from Father, our God, from Grandfather Creator, to Conchula, from all of the spirits that we all worship, the greater power that watches out for us, that this voyage would be one not only of safety, but one of meaning, one that hopefully continues to join people together. And we've certainly had a very, very spiritual and important time here among the Nimipu and Brooklyn. We just want to again say Akachiaoyao for all that you did. And here you see the children of the community, 2 young kids from Orofino, 2 young kids from Lapway. And it's great to see the meeting of cultures again in this canoe, that this canoe itself has become a vessel of friendship and true reconciliation within a community that is sometimes still divided because of prejudice and racism. And there you see John Ruskey, the man who was spearheading this project. We've got something up on the screen there, Jim. And there you see John Ruskey helping to put the canoe into the water for the first time. We had never put the canoe into the water until the day we took off on our voyage, and she answered wonderfully well. And there you see the captain's brand on the back there, and we hope that Meriwether Lewis would be proud of the exercise that we were engaged in. And here are the boats making their first their run down the river here, just to give you a little idea of what the water level is on the side of the boat. Have a lot of freeboard, much more freeboard than we would have expected. And this is the log in, just watching it on the first day as it moves through the water, much more like a canoe than those that you may remember from 2002 when Tom Meyer and myself and another 30 fellows took a trip down the Columbia in 2002 to find out what it was all about. And you may remember we had about 3 inches of freeboard. That means the amount of boat above the water. And we're very, very happy to say that the canoe that we have now built here and now making its way down the Snake River, we've got about at least 10 inches of freeboard, and so we're very happy with that. That bodes well for us. We're going to have a few more photographs to look at as we do that, but I want to talk for a minute before we go to the last photographs as we continue to show you pictures of us moving on the water. People may say, well, you know, why are you dressed like that today, Scott? Well, the Live with Lewis project has talked about the trek across the country, the trek we're taking, and the trek that the original expedition took. As I mentioned several times throughout this broadcast today, we are now back on fundamentally different waters than we were on before. You may remember when we were on the Missouri with the Discovery expedition that those boats were all motorized, and we were moving motorized vessels against a very modern river. And the boats themselves used modern construction techniques in order to be able to ply those modern waters, which are fundamentally different than the rivers that Lewis and Clark traveled on, with the exception of parts of the upper Missouri where we took the dugout through this year. Now, the water that we're going to be on from this point forward until we get to Bonneville Dam, which is 140 miles inland from the mouth of the Columbia, these next several hundred miles will be on impounded water. That means water that's held in by a dam. It's very deep. It suffers from lake effect on it, which means that when the wind blows, just like on the ocean, you could be in the deepest water in the ocean. The waves will come up. There will be white water, white caps, and it's extremely, extremely dangerous. With that in mind, we are taking precautions, and to different degrees. Not all of the guys are wearing full suits. Some guys aren't wearing any at all. We have one man who is trying to even incorporate some leather to have a greater understanding of how the leather wore. However, we've talked about this in the past, and leather is somewhat of a danger and would have not been probably used by the original expedition in the deeper waters because of the danger of getting wet and being submerged by it. What you can see me wearing today is a wetsuit. I am in a head-to-toe wetsuit. I'm also wearing my web gear, my military issue web gear. In fact, today's broadcast will be my last broadcast as a member of the United States Army National Guard. I'll be getting out here in just a very short period of time, and as you may or may not know, I'm now in the Oregon National Guard, finishing up the trip as we get closer to the ocean rather than the Montana. And but the suit that I'm wearing basically would be something that a military person engaged in water activities would be wearing. So we're bringing this contemporary aspect to it again. The gear is very important. The gear that we used during the mountains when we were on horseback, that was traditional gear, much of it, it answered perfectly. But traditional gear on these modern rivers is kind of dangerous. The wools, the cottons, all those things are great to put on after you're dry again, but it's quite likely that we're going to get wet over the next several weeks. So we're wearing these modern gear, and I want to talk to kids very quickly about this. We are very experienced, all of us who are on the water. We wear life jackets anytime that we're on the water. Anytime that we're on the water, because that's an accident can happen at any time, and we really, really want to underscore safety. What you see us doing in this project, many of these things are very dangerous, and we don't recommend that you take them lightly. So if you're going to engage in horseback riding, canoeing, boating, make sure that you take the proper precautions. We certainly do. And this is a life jacket, the wetsuit, and we have on it, I have a whistle in case that I end up in the water, a knife to cut line in case I'm caught up, and we have canteens, of course, in the water. So we're prepared for a very modern part of this bicentennial journey as we make our way down the Snake River. We're going to show you a little more footage here and a few more slides and photographs of the boats moving on the water, and hopefully in the last few, as we get closer and closer to what we've been doing the last day or so, you'll get a deeper understanding of how this river is transitioning. And here you see us in the canoe again. Now here we are, again, dressed traditionally at this very early stage as we're making our way past the confluence, because we knew that there were people going to take photographs and those sorts of things, so we want to try to continue to give a visual picture of what the expedition would have looked like. Again, still using safety, keeping safety at the foremost of our operation. And there you see Bison in the canoe with us, eager to get back in the water. He's had a tough time. He ran those 300 miles from Dillon, Montana from Grant, Montana over to Orofino, Idaho, and he was ready for a break. Now here you see us over the last couple of days. Now we're getting into deeper and deeper water. We're out on the Lower Granite Lake, which is the impounded water that stretches from Lower Granite Dam all the way up to the town of Lewiston, Clarkston. And should I continue, Jim? Yeah. Okay. And there you see the boats making their way down the water, and you see the water's getting much, much deeper. And I don't know if we've got a wide shot there to kind of give a sense of what kind of water we're on, but there you can see that's no longer the Clearwater River. We are now moving into a large body of water, and we've still got a few more photos, don't we? And this has been a 3-week period of time, and a lot has happened. We're hoping to be able to get the archive footage up as soon as we can. And I apologize for not mentioning it at the beginning of the broadcast. Please, we always welcome questions and comments. Don't forget to send those to us at lewisandclark@clayton.mo.us. That's Lewis and Clark, all one word, at Clayton, CLAYTON.K12.mo.us. We're going to go back and take look at a few more photographs of what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Here we are, the boat in the water for the first time. John and Mike giving it a shot the first day. We had beautiful weather overall. I want to thank Doug Iyer, Tom Iyer's brother, who's acting as a support boat for us. And there again are the young people. We felt it important to give these youngsters the first ride in the boat. It's been a very spiritual trip. Willow Bill, who's joined us, a great storyteller and artisan in his own right, who's joined us. And there's the boat making its way away from the shore for the first time and heading down from Orofino, Canoe Camp. There just to the left is the original site of Canoe Camp. Now you're going to see something exciting the first day out. One of the problems, sometimes you have inexperienced canoeists in the river. Sometimes you have very experienced canoeists in the river. And sometimes very experienced people can make mistakes too and be caught up in an accident. And here we are hitting a set of rapids, and despite what hindsight is always 20/20, but these fellows decided to take one course of the river rather than another, and you're about to see what happens and how quickly the river can grab a hold of you. The boat flipped, they righted the boat, and continued their way down the river. And that little cold bath the other morning reminded us all that even the best of us can get wet out here in the water, and so we want to make sure we emphasize safety to all of the young people watching today. We had to go back over the mountains very quickly the other day because one of our party wasn't with us, and we saw snow at Lost Trail Pass. Snow at 7,000 feet at Lost Trail Pass because Little Wolf, Taneslaloo, was waiting to join us. So during the horseback ride, we had no way of moving him, and so Taneslaloo has come over the pass and joined us. And his crossing was watched by several of the local inhabitants of the Lost Trail Pass area there. And it's nice to have Taneslaloo back with us. He joined us here at Jim Cook's Clearwater Canoe Camp, where we spent several nights. And here we are now, making our way down the Lower Granite Lake out of Lewiston. We're about 30 miles west now of Lewiston, and we've entered the chamber now. Now you're inside one of the highest dam lock chambers in the world, really. This is a 100-foot drop right here, and there the canoe has emerged, and we are continuing on down the river. And you can see what a different landscape this has become, and this will continue now for about another 200 miles, this sort of awe-inspiring vastness like this before we reach the Columbia Gorge and ultimately the Pacific Ocean. So we want to thank everyone today for joining us to kind of get an update, to hear the latest electronic report back to you in Washington, Mr. President. And the project is continuing on, and there you see the results of the last several weeks of work as we have transitioned once again from horses now back to the water, back to the canoes, which in some ways seems to be our natural state. We want to thank everyone who's been instrumental in making this possible. First of all, we want to say kachialia to all of the Nimipu and Nez Perce people, and we encourage all of the folks who are out there in our audience to learn more about the Nez Perce. This is a wonderful culture, a distinct culture, and one that really has a great deal to offer the greater American culture as a point of influence. So we encourage you to do that. Again, kachialia to the Nimipu. And we want to say thank you to Tom Iyer, who spearheaded this work here in Lewiston, making a canoe possible here, and a canoe that's worthy of this trip down the river, that will be able to ply these waters safely and ultimately carry not only us, but our internet audience to the ocean as we try to bring the trail to the American people. I want to thank Bennett Lumber, Columbia Paints, the people of the Idaho State Parks, of course, all of our normal sponsors and collaborators, and remind you that shortly after this broadcast will be our video conference today, and we ask you to join us for that. Remember, always send your questions and comments to us at lewisandclark@clayton.k12.mo.us. Until we see you again in a couple of weeks or in a couple of minutes, we proceed on. Peace and friendship.